Welcome back to Sayers and Secrets, where intellect and irony meet in the quiet hum of a brownstone office. Tonight's case, Nero Wolfe and Archie's farewell on the Stoop, unfolds in the rain-slick corridors of guilt and greed, where a dying husband leaves behind a blank page that isn't quite empty, and a woman's secret keeps writing its own confession. As Wolfe dissects deceit with surgical calm and Archie draws his lines in wit and weariness, the final truth emerges, not from bullets or bribes, but from human vanity, polished and poisonous. Before we begin, take a breath, for what seems concluded may only be cleverly disguised. Do you think conscience ever truly settles its debts? Subscribe and step back into the lamplight with us. Pour something dark, something quiet, and let the mystery begin. The doorbell wasn't supposed to ring that early. Not when Fritz was still polishing the silver and Wolfe hadn't started on the first beer. But it did, and the chime sounded like a hand trying to slip a question through the air. I was at my desk with the morning mail, so I beat Fritz to it and swung the door open. She stood there in a storm-colored coat, the kind that tries too hard to look modest. Her gloves were damp, her jaw set for a fight, and her eyes, well, they looked like they'd already lost one. "Is this Nero Wolfe's residence?" she asked. "Unless you're selling encyclopedias," I told her. "You've come to the right volcano. Step inside before Fritz decides you're a draft." She crossed the threshold with the kind of care people use when they know they might not be welcome anywhere else. Fritz materialized with a towel and a frown for the umbrella. I took her coat, noting the faint scent of gardenia. Expensive if you can afford it. Desperate if you can't. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe," she said. "It's urgent." Everyone's case is, until it isn't. I gestured toward the office door. "But if you can survive a 30-second wait while I clear the air with the management, you might get lucky." Inside, Wolfe was still in the chair that looked built for him and no one else, dealing the morning's attack on his stomach. Corn cakes, honey, and a scowl. He looked up when I entered. "A woman," I said. 30-ish. Looks like the weather beat her home and says it's urgent. He made a sound that in his language translates to "pui," but carries the rhythm of a drum warning off intruders. "Archie." The hour is 9:15. No rational person disturbs me before 10. "Sure," I said, "but she looks like one who already disturbed herself." His eyes came up. Slow, considering. "Does she appear solvent?" Her coat cost $50 more than she wanted to admit. "That is neither promise nor proof. Admit her, but only because the morning paper lacks entertainment." I opened the door and motioned her in. Wolfe didn't rise. He never does. But his gaze adjusted to her like a lens, finding its focus. "Your name," he said. "Marion Kent." She sat down as if the chair might reject her. "And I think my husband is about to be arrested for something he didn't do." "Most husbands are," I said. Wolfe cut me a glance that trimmed the comment mid-air. "Proceed, madam," he murmured. She twisted her gloves once. Twice. "It's about Mr. Leonard Rowe, the man who disappeared last night. The police think Richard, my husband, threatened him over a business deal." I took out my notebook because Wolfe's brows had flickered upward by a millimeter. "Missing person or presumed corpse?" I asked. "Missing," she said. "But they found his watch by the river. They'll find him next." Wolfe's fingers steepled. "And your husband?" "He's at home, under guard, I think. Inspector Kramer was there when I left." That name gave the morning some spice. I saw Wolfe's nostrils widen, which for him is fireworks. "You presume," he said, "that the inspector's opinion is mistaken." "I know it is," she said, "because I'm the one who hated Mr. Rowe." Richard didn't. That stopped even me for a second. She wasn't bluffing. Her voice cracked on hated like glass under a heel. Wolfe's lids lowered. "You intrigue me, madam." Confessing hatred is one thing. Volunteering for suspicion is another. Why come here? Because you can make them listen. She leaned forward. If you don't, they'll hang it on him, and I couldn't. Her throat closed. I offered her the handkerchief I keep for tears and mustard. Wolfe's tone was flat but alive. Archie, telephone Mr. Kramer. Inform him that I am, reluctantly, engaged in a matter that may intersect his. Then, Miss Kent, you will recount precisely the circumstances under which Mr. Rowe vanished. I reached for the phone, already picturing Kramer's reaction. He'd start with a grunt and end with a growl. The cord tightened around my wrist as if it knew the call was going to hurt someone's digestion. Make it concise, Wolfe added. I detest preliminary thunder. I dialed, and on the second ring, Kramer's voice hit the wire like a brick. Goodwin, what is it now? Brace yourself, I said. Wolfe's got a client, and you've got a missing man named Rowe. We may be rowing in the same mud. There was a pause, a long, smoky one. If Wolfe's sniffing this, tell him to keep his orchids out of police business. Rowe's not just missing. We think he took a dive. Literal or metaphorical? I asked. You'll find out when the dragline does. Behind me, Wolfe's voice cut in. Tell Mr. Kramer he may find his dragline unnecessary if he lends us an hour of civility. I relayed it, word for word. Kramer snorted. Tell him to save his vocabulary for the jury. Then he hung up. I set the receiver down. That went well. He's already engraving your invitation to the inquest. Bah! Wolfe closed his eyes. Miss Kent, continue. She did. Haltingly, tracing the story of a vanished partner, a contract dispute, and a dinner meeting that never ended. As she spoke, I watched Wolfe's thumb move in measured circles against his forefinger, his version of a stopwatch. When it stopped, I knew he'd found something. Archie, he said quietly, we shall, after all, forgo the 10 o'clock session in the plant rooms. Prepare the car. That meant one thing. Wolfe was leaving the brownstone before noon, which by itself was a headline. Out, I said. That's almost indecent. He ignored me. Miss Kent, you will accompany us. I wish to inspect your home before Inspector Kramer can sterilize it with procedure. I was already at the closet for my hat when the phone rang again. Hold it, I said, catching the receiver before it could rattle again. Goodwin speaking. A man's voice came through, low and close, the kind that doesn't waste consonants. This is Sergeant Stebbins. Kramer told me to call. You tell Wolfe to stay out of this, or I'll personally escort him back to his armchair. I looked at Wolfe, who had turned slightly toward the sound, as if he could taste irritation through the wire. Sorry, Stebbins, I said. The armchair just left a forwarding address. You might catch it on the curb if you hurry. Wolfe raised a finger, which meant he wanted the rest. I gave it to him. Stebbins says if you stick your nose in, he'll shorten it. Phooey. Wolfe opened his eyes. A futile threat. My nose is serviceable as it is. Tell Mr. Stebbins that the law's prerogative is not exclusive and that reason still breathes air. I translated. He says he'll do what he wants. Have a lovely day. Then I hung up before Stebbins could show me his vocabulary. Miss Kent had been watching the exchange as if the phone might explode. Are we actually going? She asked. Against my better judgment, I said. Wolfe doesn't usually travel unless it's to insult a chef in person. I detest motion, Wolfe confirmed, levering himself up with the slow deliberation of a monument deciding to change scenery. But sometimes, Archie, to smell corruption, one must leave the sanctuary. I handed him his hat. And I thought you just liked the challenge of fitting through the door. He gave me a glance that would have flattened a lesser man. Fritz, my coat. While Fritz helped him into it, I made sure Miss Kent was steady. She looked pale enough to blend with the wallpaper. The cab waited out front, rain still scratching the street like it had a grudge. Wolfe lowered himself into the back seat, taking up most of the rear real estate. Miss Kent sat opposite him, small and tense. I climbed in front, next to the driver. "Address?" I asked. She gave it, her voice soft. "Riverside Drive, near 96th. "Of course," I said. "The scenic route to scandal." Wolfe closed his eyes, but I could tell from the flex in his jaw he was listening. He always is. The silence in the cab was thick enough to butter. I watched the city slide by through the wet window, shop signs bleeding in the rain, people half running with umbrellas like startled beetles. When we turned onto Riverside, she spoke again. "Mr. Rowe was supposed to meet Richard at 8 last night at the restaurant. He never showed. But the police found Richard's car near the bridge this morning, and now they think that he lured Rowe there for a scenic swim," I said. "What was Rowe to him besides bad business?" Her hands twisted in her lap. "They were partners, sort of. Richard's company handles logistics. Rowe supplied materials. They argued last week over an unpaid invoice." Wolfe's voice drifted from the back, mild and sharp. "You said you hated Mr. Rowe. Why?" She flinched. "Because he ruined people. He used charm like a scalpel. My sister worked for him once. She—" The rest broke off in her throat. "Enough," Wolfe said softly. "We shall examine facts, not grief. Archie, remind me to note her candor later." "Consider it noted," I said. The cab rolled to a stop in front of a sandstone building with balconies like folded arms. Miss Kent led us up. Inside, the place smelled of lilies and expensive indecision. The parlor was neat, too neat, like someone had tidied to impress a judge. "Where is your husband now?" Wolfe asked. "In the study. 2 detectives are with him. Then we shall be civil." Wolfe moved through the doorway like a tide coming in slow but certain. The study had mahogany shelves, a decanter half empty, and a man standing by the window in shirt sleeves. He was tall, dark-haired, with the expression of someone already rehearsing his defense. "Mr. Kent," Wolfe said, not bothering with an introduction. "You are suspected of drowning your associate. An irritating premise, but one must engage it." Kent turned, blinking. "Who the devil?" "Wolfe," I said. "Nero Wolfe. Your wife thought you could use a mind with upholstery." The detectives by the wall exchanged looks. One of them, a burly one with Kramer's fingerprints on his attitude, spoke. "Inspector left word nobody touches anything." "Who invited you?" "I did," Wolfe said. "You may tell the inspector that I intend to leave everything precisely as stupid as I found it." That got me a smothered grin from the other detective. Kent, meanwhile, had gone rigid. "I didn't ask for help. I didn't do anything." "Excellent," Wolfe said. "Then you will not object to questions." The man sagged into a chair. "Ask." "Where did you last see Mr. Rowe?" "At the office yesterday afternoon. He said he'd call about dinner, but never did. I went home. Around midnight, the police came knocking." "Your car?" Wolfe asked. "I left it by the bridge. Flat tire. Walked home." "Foolish, I know." "Indeed. What of the watch they found?" He frowned. "His watch?" "I don't. How should I know?" Miss Kent stood near the door, gripping the frame. Wolfe's gaze moved from her to her husband, then to the decanter. "That whiskey was poured recently." Kent's jaw tightened. "They made me wait." "Noted. Archie, the glass." I crossed over, sniffed, then tilted it. "Fresh. No lipstick, no dust. He's not lying about the weight." "Pfui," Wolfe murmured. "Fresh liquor rarely lies, but drinkers often do." The burly detective stepped forward. "You can finish your stand-up act at home, Wolfe. We've got statements." "And doubtless you will have confessions," Wolfe said evenly, "if you keep barking at the walls. However, may I examine the study alone for 3 minutes?" "No." "Then remain, but silent." The man looked ready to test Wolfe's skull for hardness, but Kent lifted a hand. "Let him." What can it hurt? Wolfe gave him a curt nod and began to move. Slowly, like a bear testing the air. He studied the desk, the open blotter, the ashtray. His eyes caught on something small beside the pen tray. He bent slightly, miracle enough, and pointed. A tiny smear of red on the brass. Blood? I asked. Lipstick, Wolfe corrected. Miss Kent, do you wear crimson? She shook her head. No, rosewood. He straightened. Then another woman has been here. Kent looked baffled. That's impossible. Nothing is impossible except your innocence if you continue lying, Wolfe said calmly. Who was she? No one. Roe, maybe. He had women everywhere. Archie, Wolfe said. Note the defensive pronoun. Got it, I said. We'll underline it later. The second detective, the one who hadn't spoken yet, cleared his throat. There's a Miss Lydia Ames, Roe's secretary. She came by earlier to return a briefcase. Wolfe turned his head an inch. And did she, in fact, return it? The man blinked. Well, no. She left when the inspector arrived. Miss Kent's eyes widened. Lydia Ames. But she called me last night. Said she had to see me about Roe. She sounded afraid. Indeed, Wolfe said. And now she is either hiding or dead. Archie, call Saul Panzer. Tell him to locate Miss Ames immediately. Begin with her apartment and continue with the police morgue if necessary. I crossed to the phone again, dialing our best bloodhound. Saul's voice came up dry and ready. I gave him the details. He grunted approval and hung up to move. When I turned back, Wolfe had seated himself in the largest available chair, which still looked undersized. His eyes were closed, fingertips touching. Mr. Kent, he said, did you and Mr. Roe share a safe, an account, or a mistress? Kent bristled. Good God, what kind of question? The kind. That shortens inquiry. Choose one. He handled finances. I trusted him. Foolish, Wolfe said. Money breeds betrayal faster than lust, though the combination is efficient. He opened his eyes again, steady as a metronome. Mrs. Kent, your husband will be detained soon. When he is, tell the police that Nero Wolfe requests a copy of the statement. Mr. Goodwin and I will be at the brownstone awaiting news from Mr. Panzer. The burly detective snorted. Expecting miracles? No, Wolfe said, rising with effort. Only logic. Miracles are for men who lack it. We left them standing in that polished room, tension hanging like smoke. Outside, the rain had eased to a drizzle. Wolfe's breath showed in the chill. Archie, he said as we reached the cab, I suspect the missing man is not missing. Alive? Not precisely. Then what? He looked at me. Misplaced. Meaning? He didn't answer. He never does when he's building the architecture. I held the door for him and waited until he'd arranged himself like a strategist in transit. Back inside the cab, I asked, You think the lady's confession was real or rehearsal? Both, he said. She meant it, but not for the reason she believes. There's a deeper current. Find Lydia Ames, and we will know who stirred it. I nodded, watching the city smear past again. Somewhere out there, a secretary with a conscience, or a corpse, was waiting to tie the next knot. And if Saul found her, I'd be the one sent to pull it tight. Wolfe leaned his head back and closed his eyes. I shall require lunch early today. Fritz must forgive the indecency. Fine, I said. As long as we don't serve Kramer for dessert. He didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth gave the ghost of one. Kramer, he murmured, is rarely digestible. And that, for the moment, was all the prophecy I was going to get. Digestible or not, I said, he's going to knock the door down when he hears we've been trespassing on his crime scene. Wolfe's eyelids stayed shut. Then let him. Mr. Kramer's indignation is a renewable resource. I turned in my seat. You do realize the man already suspects us of hobbyist interference? I realize, he said, that the inspector's capacity for bluster exceeds his capacity for comprehension. The distinction will remain until death or retirement, which may be mercifully similar. The cab rolled over a puddle deep enough to qualify as a small lake, and Wolfe grimaced as though his constitution felt the ripple. We hit the corner of 35th, and the brownstone came into view like home base in a war zone. Fritz had the door open before I paid the fare. Inside, the familiar smell of coffee and order restored Wolfe to something resembling humanity. He crossed to his chair as if gravity worked better indoors. I shut the door, hung my hat, and waited. "Fritz," Wolfe said. "Lunch early, as mentioned. Trout with almonds and a salad without capers." "Yes, sir," Fritz answered from the kitchen, tone suggesting he'd been mentally prepared for anything short of cannibalism. I tossed my coat over the rack. "So what's next? We wait for Saul to pull Lydia Ames out of a manhole." "Do not be glib," Wolfe muttered. "Mr. Panzer has an efficiency unmatched by humor. He will call." As if on cue, the phone rang. I grabbed it. "Goodwin." "Saul," came the voice. "You were right about one thing. The girl's scared. Found her holed up in a hotel on 48th, checked in under her mother's maiden name." "Alive, then?" "Great. What's she running from?" "She wouldn't say much over the phone. Said Rose's disappearance isn't what it looks like. Asked if Wolfe would meet her, alone." "Alone?" I said. "He doesn't even meet lunch alone." "I told her that," Saul said. "She still insists. Says it's not safe otherwise." "Give me the address." I scribbled it down. "Sit on her, but don't spook her. If she sneezes, call me." I hung up and turned to Wolfe. "The bird's alive and flapping. Wants a private audience." His eyes opened, narrow and bright. "Curious. When a frightened woman demands privacy, it is rarely for seduction. She fears exposure. Or she's staging one," I said. He made a sound halfway between a grunt and a hum. "Archie, call Mr. Panzer again. Inform him that he is my proxy. He will attend the meeting, inquire, and relay her words verbatim." "Sure," I said, because nothing inspires confidence like sending a substitute detective with the personality of granite. "Phooey. Miss Ames will speak to competence, not charm." I picked up the phone again, relayed the message, and Saul agreed. 2 hours, he said. "I'll have something by then." I hung up once more. Now we wait. Wolfe frowned. "We do not wait idly. You will telephone Mr. Kramer. Tell him I have information he will not want, but must receive." That's every conversation we've ever had. Nonetheless. So I did. The inspector came on, fast and hot. "Goodwin, you and that oversized brain trust are dancing close to obstruction." "Morning to you, too," I said. "Wolfe wants you to know there's a missing secretary, found alive, with something to say about Roe." Kramer's voice sharpened. "Where?" I looked at Wolfe. He shook his head once. I smiled into the receiver. "In a location we'd prefer not to share until she's ready to talk." Kramer erupted in stereo. "Goodwin, I swear—" "Save it. You'll thank us when we hand you a living witness instead of a corpse. Keep your badge clean for now." I hung up before the air could ignite. Wolfe sighed, a long, slow exhale that probably weighed 10 pounds. "You enjoy goading him?" "Sure," I said. "It's the only exercise I get." He shut his eyes again. "I prefer results to rhetoric. Miss Ames's statement may define the entire case." "Define or detonate?" "Possibly both." The bell rang again before we could stretch the speculation. Fritz's voice drifted from the hallway. "Inspector Kramer, sir." I looked at Wolfe. "You summoned him by insult." "Send him in," Wolfe said. Kramer entered like a thundercloud that hadn't finished raining. His coat was wet, his cigar damp at the tip. He planted himself squarely in front of Wolfe's desk. "You think you're clever dragging me through this again?" "Not particularly," Wolfe said. I think you are obstinate, which is less enviable but occasionally useful. Sit. Kramer didn't. You've been to the Kent house, talked to the wife, now you're hiding witnesses. If Roe's dead, you're flirting with obstruction. Bah. Wolfe flicked a hand. If Mr. Roe is dead, you will have found his corpse. Have you? Kramer's jaw worked. Not yet. Then he is not dead, Wolfe said simply. That's not logic. That's arrogance. Both may coexist, Wolfe replied. Miss Kent's account is inconsistent with murder. Her confession of hatred was voluntary, not strategic. Her husband's demeanor lacked the confusion of guilt. Therefore, the premise of homicide collapses. Kramer barked a laugh. You build castles out of adjectives. The man's gone, his watch was by the river, and your client's husband lied about the car. That's evidence, not poetry. Wolfe tilted his head. Inspector, you possess fragments, not structure. When Saul Panza returns, I will invite you to witness the correction of your error. Until then, you may either glower or leave. Kramer glared at him, then turned to me. One of these days, Goodwin, I'll haul you in just to see if he sweats. Do it on a cool day, I said. Save the department ice budget. He left, slamming the door hard enough to shake the orchids upstairs. Wolfe grunted approval. A man of consistent temper, if no intellect. I sat down. You sure you want him here for the grand reveal? He might arrest you for being smug. He will attend, because I wish to see his face when the truth emerges. I leaned back. You're confident for a guy with nothing but a theory and an appetite. Confidence, Wolfe said, is merely certainty awaiting evidence. Fritz entered with the trout, steam rising like a small cloud. Wolfe's hand twitched toward it before Fritz had set it down. Watching him eat is like observing ritual, precise, reverent, and faintly terrifying. I used the lull to line up what we knew. Roe vanished, his watch near the river, Kent looking framed, and a secretary hiding in a hotel. The pieces fit like buttons on the wrong coat. Halfway through dessert, the phone rang again. Wolfe gestured for me to take it, unwilling to risk custard delay. Goodwin. Saul's voice came tight. Got the statement. You'll want to hear this in person. Trouble? Plenty. She says Roe staged his own disappearance. I looked at Wolfe. She says he's not dead. He planned it. Wolfe's fork paused mid-air. Where is she now? In my car. We're heading your way, but we might have a tail. Somebody else wants her quiet. Drive carefully, Wolfe said. Archie will meet you at the corner. I dislike bullet holes in upholstery. I was already up, grabbing my hat. What am I expecting? A woman terrified by truth, Wolfe said, and a man terrified of exposure. The street outside smelled like wet newsprint. I spotted Saul's sedan turning onto the block, headlights dim in the drizzle. I waved him in and opened the passenger door. Lydia Ames looked like she'd been hiding in her own shadow for a week. Pale, eyes darting, lips the color of old paper. Saul kept the engine running. Any trouble? I asked. Maybe, he said. Black sedan's been behind us since 50th. No plates, no hurry, just distance. Keep the girl low. I scanned the street. Nothing moved except rain and nerves. We hustled her inside. Wolfe was waiting, chair turned slightly toward the door like a throne with expectations. Miss Ames, he said, you have information. She nodded, shivering. Mr. Roe isn't dead. He made me help him disappear. Said he'd ruin me if I didn't. Describe the arrangement, Wolfe ordered. He took money from the company, forged signatures. Richard Kent's. He said if anyone found out, he'd vanish and leave Richard to hang. He dropped the watch near the river and told me to tell no one. But then, someone followed me. I think they killed him anyway. Wolfe's eyes glinted. You think, or you know? She swallowed. I found his briefcase outside my apartment this morning. It wasn't there last night. I whistled. That's either guilt or a ghost delivery. Neither, Wolfe said quietly. It is theater. He leaned forward, fingertips steepled. Miss Ames, did you ever see the forged documents? No. He kept them locked in his office safe. Then we shall retrieve them, Wolfe said. Archie, telephone Mr. Kent. Inform him his partner may have staged more than one illusion and that we intend to expose the final act tonight. She looked up, trembling. Tonight? Before others write the script, Wolfe said. Before others write the script, I said, we might want to make sure we've got the lead roles filled. You're sending me to the Kent place again. Indeed, Wolfe replied. You will retrieve the forged documents if they exist and verify whether Mr. Rowe's disappearance was a clever substitution or a fatal rehearsal. And if Kramer's still got his watchdogs there, then you will charm them, he said. You're not deficient in that vulgar art. Nice of you to notice. I grabbed my hat and looked at Miss Ames. You stay here. Don't move, don't breathe near a window, and don't touch anything Wolfe can deduct from. She nodded, clutching her handbag like it held a life preserver. Wolfe watched her for a moment, then flicked his fingers toward the phone. Saul, you will accompany Mr. Goodwin. Drive, observe, and avoid flamboyance. Too late, I said, and we were gone. Saul's car was still warm from the engine's nerves. He didn't talk much. Never does unless the words matter. We slid through the wet grid of streets toward Riverside Drive, headlights carving quiet geometry through the drizzle. At the curb, the Kent house loomed behind its railings, respectable and nervous. One of Kramer's men still guarded the front like he expected burglars with press passes. I nudged Saul. Hold the fort. I'll handle the diplomacy. The cop recognized me the second I hit the steps. Goodwin, you again. You collect crime scenes. Only the well-decorated ones, I said. I need a word with Mr. Kent. He folded his arms. He's asleep. Kramer told us no visitors. Then this isn't a visit. It's a rescue. You can keep your notebook clean. That earned me a scowl and a phone call to headquarters. 10 minutes and one superior's sigh. Later, I was through the door. Kent met me in the hall, looking like a man halfway between hope and hangover. Goodwin, my wife said Wolfe's involved again. Should I be grateful or nervous? Both, I said. We need to see your office safe. Miss Ames claims Rowe kept forged documents there. His face flickered. Guilt, surprise, or both. That's impossible. The police searched it. Then it's harmless to open again. He hesitated. They sealed it. Great, I said. So unseal it. I'll take the blame if they yell. We went into the study. The tape over the safe's dial gleamed under the lamplight. He tore it off and spun the dial, slow and deliberate. When the door creaked open, the smell of paper and cold metal came out. I crouched and pulled a stack of folders. The top one bore the letterhead of Rowe's company. Bingo, I said. Invoices, contracts, looks official enough to fool a judge. Kent stared down. I never signed those. The amounts are wrong. My company never saw this money. Then Wolfe just won himself dessert, I said, flipping through the papers. This one's dated 2 days before Rowe vanished. That means... A sound interrupted. Soft, deliberate footsteps in the hall. I froze. Kent's head jerked toward the door. Expecting company? I whispered. No. The knob turned. I slid behind the desk, hand near my gun. Not that I like using it, but sometimes polite conversation fails. The door opened, and a tall woman stepped in. Raincoat, hair pinned under a hat, eyes steady. Mrs. Kent, I said. You walk softly for someone under suspicion. Her expression didn't move. I came home for my husband's sake. The police said I could return. What are you doing here? Checking your husband's filing habits, I said. She looked at the open safe, then at me. Those are private. So's murder, I said. But that didn't stop anyone. Her gaze darted to Kent. Richard, you shouldn't. He cut her off. They're forged, Marion. Rowe made them. Something passed between them then. One of those silent exchanges married people have when the next sentence might explode the world. Her jaw tightened. Then burn them. I straightened. Not tonight, lady. Those go back to Wolfe. He'll want to play archaeologist. Her eyes turned to me, sharp and desperate. You don't understand. If the police see those, they'll think Richard forged them. They won't believe a dead man did it. I had to admit, the logic wasn't bad. Then let Wolfe explain it to them first. He does better with vocabulary than bonfires. She stepped closer. Please, Mr. Goodwin, let me destroy them. I kept my grip on the papers. Not happening. If you want to plead your case, talk to Wolfe. He's home and sitting comfortably, which is more than I can say for your husband. Kent moved suddenly. One stride, one grab, and yanked the folder from my hand. She's right, he said. They'll hang me if this gets out. Hold it, I said, reaching across the desk. But the sound that came next stopped all three of us cold. A low creak outside, the unmistakable hinge of a door opening where no one had knocked. Saul's voice came from the doorway, flat, efficient. Someone else is in the house. I turned. How many? 2. Back entrance. One's heading this way. Mrs. Kent gasped. Kramer's men. No, Saul said. Not cops. Too quiet. I shoved the papers inside my coat. We're leaving. Front door, quick. Kent hesitated, but I grabbed his arm. Saul took the lead, moving silent as habit. We hit the hall just as a figure appeared from the rear corridor. Broad shoulders, coat collar high, revolver glinting. He shouted, "Stop!" I didn't argue. Instead, I ducked left and pulled Kent behind a column. Saul's gun was already up, steady as geometry. The man fired once, loud, sharp, and stupid. Plaster dust fell from the ceiling. Saul's return shot took a chunk out of the banister and the intruder's nerve. He bolted down the stairs and vanished into the wet night. We didn't chase him. Wolfe pays us for results, not funerals. Mrs. Kent pressed a hand to her mouth. Who was that? Could be anyone from Rowe's fan club, I said. Or Rowe himself if he's tired of hiding. Kent stared. You think he's alive? Your wife's lipstick isn't the only clue suggesting resurrection. I handed Saul the papers. Take these to Wolfe. If anyone tails you, let them learn regret. He nodded and left without ceremony. Mrs. Kent was trembling now. Please, Mr. Goodwin, you have to believe me. I didn't know any of this. I believe you wanted to protect him, I said, jerking my head at her husband. Which is sweet, but suicidal. Get upstairs. Both of you, lock the doors and stay quiet. Kent opened his mouth, but I cut him off. Don't argue. The man with the gun doesn't take reservations. They went. I made sure the front was clear before stepping out. The street looked empty again, though the shadows were thicker than the rain deserved. I caught a flash at the corner, maybe headlights, maybe curiosity, and filed it for Wolfe. Back in Saul's car, the papers crinkled under my arm like live bait. I kept the window cracked, eyes on the mirrors, but no one followed. When I reached the brownstone, Wolfe was exactly where I'd left him, as immovable as a moral principle. Lydia Ames sat across from him, smaller now, eyes down. I dropped the folder on the desk. Forgeries, fresh and fragrant, plus an uninvited guest with bad aim. Excellent, Wolfe said. And the Kents? Still married, still scared. Whoever came after those papers knew they existed. That means Rowe isn't working alone. He nodded once. Precisely. Mr. Rowe required an accomplice to plant the illusion of death. Miss Ames was coerced, not complicit. The remaining partner, therefore, is hidden in plain sight. I leaned on the desk. You've got a name? His eyes flicked open. Yes, but proof precedes accusation. Then what's next? Kramer, he said. Invite him, Mr. and Mrs. Kent, and Miss Ames to attend here this evening. We shall conclude the matter before it kills someone less deserving. I grinned. A dinner party with evidence on the menu. Pfui, I detest parties. But justice occasionally demands hospitality. The phone rang again, short, sharp, insistent. Fritz answered, then turned toward us. Inspector Kramer, sir. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Ah, he murmured. Our guest accepts. Send him in, Wolfe said, and leaned back just far enough to look regal instead of merely round. Kramer came through the door like a man dragging thunder behind him. He stopped when he saw Lydia Ames still perched on the edge of her chair. So this is the witness you've been hiding. She was not hidden, Wolfe said mildly, merely preserved until her words could be of use. Kramer gave me a look that could have peeled wallpaper. You like playing clerk to His Holiness, don't you? It beats working retail, I said. He ignored that and faced Wolfe again. All right, let's hear the fairy tale. You may sit first, Wolfe replied. Standing will not enhance comprehension. Kramer dropped into a chair like it had insulted him. Talk, Wolfe gestured toward Lydia. Miss Ames, you will recount for Inspector Kramer what you told us. Her voice trembled, but the words came out clear enough. Mr. Rowe planned to fake his death. He said he'd planted false papers to frame Mr. Kent for embezzlement. He forced me to help. I thought he'd gone abroad, but someone shot at us tonight. Kramer's eyebrows jerked. Shot? Who? Unknown, Wolfe said, but it confirms the survival of at least one participant with lethal anxiety. Kramer rubbed his temple. You're telling me this Rowe jerk might still be alive? I'm telling you, Wolfe said, that he was alive as of 2 days ago. Whether he continues to be so depends on his partner's competence. Kramer groaned. Goodwin, did you dig him up personally? Not yet, I said, but his ghost's been busy enough to need an agent. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. Mr. Kramer, you have assumed murder because you found a watch. You should have assumed deceit because you found only a watch. Kramer's cigar twitched. You saying he staged the whole thing just to frame Kent? That's cute, but where's your body, or lack of one? Wolfe's eyes half closed. I anticipate the body shortly, Inspector. Perhaps delivered by you. That stopped him mid-chew on the cigar. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Wolfe said, that the living participants of Mr. Rowe's drama will reconvene here within the hour. One of them will not leave without your assistance. Hell, Kramer said. You're staging your own courtroom again. I am correcting your oversight. Wolfe pressed the buzzer on his desk. Fritz, prepare the dining room for 5. We shall require coffee, sandwiches, and restraint. Restraint? I asked. Verbal, not physical, Wolfe said, though the glint in his eye left room for negotiation. The bell rang again, punctual as doom. Fritz reappeared, ushering in Mr. and Mrs. Kent. She was pale but tight-lipped. He looked like a man expecting either absolution or a headline. Kramer's eyebrows jumped again. We're running a hotel now. An inquest, Wolfe said. Do take notes if it soothes you. I motioned the Kents to the sofa. Wolfe waited until everyone was arranged like pieces on a chessboard, then folded his hands on his stomach. We will proceed. The facts stripped of embellishment, Mr. Rowe embezzled funds from the Kent Company. To disguise his theft, he forged documents implicating Mr. Kent and planted them in the safe. He then disappeared, leaving his watch by the river to suggest suicide or murder. Miss Ames assisted under duress. The forgeries have been recovered. Kramer grunted. That's a pretty speech. What you're missing is proof. Precisely why you're here, Wolfe said. The proof will identify itself. Marion Kent's hands tightened on her purse. "Mr. Wolfe, please. If those papers become public, they'll destroy my husband's business." "Madam," Wolfe said, "if your husband is innocent, truth is his sole ally. Concealment breeds guilt by odor alone." Kent shifted in his seat. "You said Rowe forged them. That clears me, doesn't it?" Wolfe studied him. "It would, if Mr. Rowe were alive to confess. Unfortunately, I suspect he is not." That froze the air like a snap of dry ice. Kramer's cigar stopped halfway to his mouth. "You said he was alive 2 days ago." "I did," Wolfe said. "And I also said his continued existence depended on his partner's competence. I fear one of them realized too late that sharing a secret with Mr. Rowe was perilous." Mrs. Kent gasped. "You can't mean—" "I can," Wolfe said, "and I do. Mr. Rowe's plan required an accomplice within the Kent household to retrieve the forged papers and destroy them once suspicion fell elsewhere. Someone who knew both the timing of the disappearance and the contents of the safe." Kramer growled. "You're pointing at Kent?" "Not yet," Wolfe said. "Mr. Kent had motive but no opportunity to erase Rowe while under police surveillance. The shooting tonight suggests another hand." I said, "Which leaves—" "Silence, Archie," Wolfe murmured. "Allow the deduction its pace." His eyes moved to Marion Kent. "Madam, you came to me professing hatred of Mr. Rowe. That was truthful, but incomplete. You also loved him once, did you not?" Her lips parted, then shut again. The pulse in her neck beat visible. "That's a vile thing to say." "It is merely accurate," Wolfe said. "Your reaction confirms it. You aided him once, perhaps believing his scheme would spare your husband. When he turned coercive, you sought me. Tonight, when you realized the forgeries remained, you returned to the house to destroy them and discovered Mr. Rowe waiting." Kramer sat forward. "You're saying she shot him?" Wolfe lifted a finger. "I'm saying she confronted him. He was alive, furious, and desperate. In the struggle, she struck him with the revolver found by the river. The fall killed him. His body lies where the tide caught it, beneath the south abutment of the bridge." Mrs. Kent's voice cracked. No, that's not." Her husband turned toward her slowly. "Marion." Tears pooled without movement. "He wouldn't stop. He said he'd ruin you, both of us. I just wanted him to leave. I didn't mean—" Wolfe sighed. "Intent seldom tempers consequence. Inspector, you may locate the body as I described. The tide will have receded sufficiently by now." Kramer stood, face tight. "I'll send men. But if this pans out, Wolfe, I swear, one day I'm going to make you a witness instead of a prophet." "You may try," Wolfe said. "Bring your men quietly. Miss Ames will sign her statement in your presence. Mr. Kent, your exoneration will follow the tide." Kramer gestured to me. "Goodwin, you're coming too. If he's wrong, I want a front row seat." "Delighted," I said. "But if he's right, remember to clap." Wolfe waved us away. "Return swiftly. I dislike suspense between courses." We piled into Kramer's car, siren off, but tension high. The city's lights smeared across the windshield like bad watercolor. Down by the river, 2 patrolmen were already waiting, lanterns bobbing against the dark. "Over here," one called. They'd pulled something tangled in reeds, a body, male, dark coat soaked to shadow. Kramer crouched and turned the face toward the light. The features were battered, water swollen, but unmistakable. "Leonard Rowe," he said grimly. Shot through the shoulder, head cracked. Wolfe, the fat oracle, strikes again. I knelt beside the corpse, noting the torn sleeve, the missing watch. Looks like he slipped trying to stage his own tragedy and got the real one instead. Kramer straightened. "No jury in the world will hang her for that, but she's still coming in." "Sure," I said. "Just tell Wolfe he solved another one over dessert." Kramer snorted. "He'll gloat." "He lives on it," I said. The rain started again, soft and steady, washing over the scene as if trying to erase it. Somewhere behind us, a tug sounded its horn, low, final, and tired. Kramer signaled his men and turned back toward the car. "Let's get back before he drafts the press release himself." I followed, thinking Wolfe wouldn't draft anything. He'd just sit there, eyes half shut, the world already rearranged to fit his logic. And tomorrow, the orchids would bloom, the beer would chill, and the brownstone would forget a murder had walked through its doors. "He'll gloat," Kramer muttered again as we climbed into the car, slamming the door hard enough to make the window shiver. I buckled in and said, "Of course he'll gloat. That's the only form of cardio he gets." Kramer grunted, flicking the headlights on. "You tell him from me. One day his mouth's gonna solve him into contempt of court." "If that day ever comes," I said, "I'll send flowers to the bench." The car engine coughed, caught, and we rolled back toward 35th with the river's smell clinging to us like something unfinished. Kramer drove in silence for a stretch, the cigar stub glowing like a tired signal light between his teeth. "He knew, damn him," he said finally. "He knew she hit Roe. You see her face when he said it?" "Yeah," I said. "She wasn't acting. She cracked clean." "She's lucky," he muttered. "If the shot had hit Roe instead of the rocks, she'd be facing the chair instead of my signature." "She'll still have Wolfe's statement to keep her awake at night," I said. "That's punishment enough." Kramer snorted. "He'll probably send her a bill embossed with philosophy." We turned the corner and pulled up in front of the brownstone. The light in the office window was still on, Wolfe's version of a porch lamp. Fritz opened the door before we knocked, like a man used to midnight returns from moral combat. Inside, Wolfe was exactly where we'd left him, eyes half closed, fingertips touching, as if he'd pause the world until we got back. Lydia Ames was still in the chair, wringing a handkerchief into an origami tragedy. "Inspector," Wolfe said without moving. "You found him?" "Yeah," Kramer said. "Dead as your tact. Exactly where you said he'd be. Satisfied?" "Moderately." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Mrs. Kent?" "Confessing to you and nobody else," Kramer said. "We've got the body, her statement, and the forgeries. It'll read clean." "Then we are concluded," Wolfe said. "Concluded," Kramer repeated. "Except for one thing. How the hell did you know she'd gone back there tonight? I hadn't told a soul we'd cleared the property." Wolfe's gaze drifted toward the orchids, polite as always when explaining the obvious. "Because, Inspector, she told me herself, though not with words. Her initial visit was emotional, not strategic. When guilt seeks absolution, it returns to the scene that birthed it. Her perfume lingered on her husband's sleeve. Ergo, she had gone there before your men sealed the study. She would return when the anxiety ripened." Kramer shook his head. "You make murder sound like gardening." "Everything grows from roots, Inspector," Wolfe said. "Even folly." I said, "Don't worry, he's done being poetic for the week." Kramer shot me a look. "You can save the wisecracks. Next time I want a call before you turn my case into a tea party." "I'd call," I said, "but the line's usually busy with you shouting." He started toward the door, paused, and jabbed a finger at Wolfe. "One day, the two of you will run out of luck." Wolfe's lips twitched. "We do not rely on luck. We rely on logic and the inspector's predictable temperament." Kramer gave me one last glare and stomped out. Fritz closed the door behind him with the delicacy of a priest sealing a tomb. The silence that followed was thick enough to slice. Wolfe reached for his beer, took a long sip, and sighed. "A tiresome business." "Sure," I said, "but it did keep us in practice. I got shot at, you got to monologue, and Kramer got his ulcer exercised. A balanced day." Lydia looked up, pale but steady. "What will happen to Mrs. Kent?" "Justice," Wolfe said, "though not the gallows. The district attorney will recognize provocation when he sees it. Miss Ames, your own involvement will be mitigated by truth. You have served its function." She rose slowly, like a person remembering gravity. "Then I suppose I'm free." "Free," Wolfe said, "is a relative term. Conscience tends to linger longer than subpoenas." She nodded, eyes wet, and I walked her to the door. Outside the air was cool, washed clean of rain and scandal. When I came back, Wolfe was staring at the empty chair she'd left behind, the corner of his mouth twitching again. Not quite satisfaction, not quite regret. "You like her?" I said. "Phooey," he said too fast. She was useful. "Sure," I said, settling in across from him. "And the Kents? They will reconstruct their lives around mutual guilt," he said. "It may even strengthen their marriage. Shared sin is adhesive." "Nice line," I said. "Put it on a wedding card." He ignored me and lifted the beer again. "Archie, you will type the notes before retiring. The clarity of memory decays with sleep." "Mine doesn't," I said. "I could tell you which tie Kramer was wearing at the river." "The hideous brown one with diagonal stripes," Wolfe said without opening his eyes. "You see, I recall as well. Nevertheless, type." I rolled my eyes and moved to the desk. The typewriter keys clicked into the night, spelling out the anatomy of another corpse, another confession, another evening in which human frailty met Wolfe's appetite for precision. The rhythm almost drowned out my own irritation. Almost. When the last line struck home, I ripped the sheet free and set it on his blotter. Done. Signed, sealed, and suitable for smugness. He gave a small grunt, which in his dialect meant approval. Good. Destroy the carbon. I dislike duplication. "Except when it comes to meals," I said. He didn't bother replying. I sat down again, stretching. "You know, if we charged Kramer rent for every time he storms in here, Fritz could retire." "Fritz will retire," Wolfe said. "Only when I do." "Then never." He raised an eyebrow. "Precisely." The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain starting up again outside. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closing, the picture of digestion and deduction. "You notice something?" I said. He didn't open his eyes. "What, Archie?" "Every time you solve one of these things, the city gets quieter, like it's holding its breath, waiting for the next idiot to make your hobby profitable." He gave a slow exhale. "That is the human pattern. Folly, concealment, revelation, remorse. And you in the middle with a beer." He smiled faintly. "I'm constant, at least." "Yeah," I said, "and I'll be here taking phone calls from the next damsel in emotional disrepair." "Undoubtedly." He finished the beer, set the glass down with that small, final tap that means he's closing the day. "Turn off the lights, Archie." I did. The city outside was still slick and breathing, the brownstone solid against it. Inside, Wolfe was already sinking into the kind of sleep only a man without physical exercise and with absolute intellectual satisfaction can achieve. And me? I stood there for a second, listening to the rain, the quiet and the faint sound of Fritz somewhere in the kitchen cleaning away evidence of another dinner and another crime solved over it. I was halfway through, turning off the lights when the phone rang. One sharp jangle that cut clean through Wolfe's near snore. He didn't open his eyes. "Archie." "Yeah, I hear it." I crossed back to the desk and picked up. "Goodwin." The voice that came through was dry enough to sandwood. "Saul Panzer. Sorry for the encore, but you'd better tell Wolfe the case isn't over." I looked over. Wolfe's eyes opened instantly, like a bear that only pretends to hibernate. "Speak," he said. I relayed. "Saul says the curtain's not down." Saul's tone sharpened. "They fished Roe out, all right, but the coroner's report came through quicker than expected. Water in the lungs, but no head wound. And the bullet doesn't match any gun in police custody." That got Wolfe sitting forward, emotion rare enough to register on the Richter scale. Repeat, he said. I did. Different caliber. Means what we thought was an accident turned into an edit. Precisely, Wolfe murmured. Mr. Rowe's death was postscript, not climax. Someone completed the farce for him. Saul added, also, Kramer's boys ran prints on the revolver found by the river. Guess who it belongs to? I sighed. Don't make me guess before breakfast. Lydia Ames. My eyes went to the empty chair she'd left hours ago. Our frightened secretary? The same. Her permit's on file. She swore she hadn't touched a gun in years. Maybe she forgot. She didn't, Wolfe said, his voice like cooled steel. She lied. I covered the mouthpiece. You sure about that? She looked about as dangerous as an empty teacup. He gave me the kind of look that would curdle milk. That was the performance, Archie. Miss Ames played ingenue to perfection. Too perfectly. Back on the line, Saul said, "Want me to bring her in?" "Locate her," Wolfe said. "Discreetly. Do not approach until instructed." Saul grunted agreement and clicked off. I put the phone down. So now the secretary shoots the embezzler she helped disappear, and we're back to square crazy. Not quite, Wolfe said. The pattern clarifies. Mr. Rowe intended extortion, not flight. Miss Ames feared exposure and reversed the play. When the Kents' quarrel muddied the water, she seized the chance to erase her blackmailer and let guilt find another host. She dumps the gun near the river, lets Marion Kent's confession seal it, and we all clap for closure, I said. He inclined his head. Until Mr. Panzer's curiosity disturbed the dust. Well, I said, you've got to hand it to her. She almost fooled the entire food chain. I do not hand admiration to murderers, Wolfe said curtly. Only acknowledgement. I folded my arms. Then what? Kramer's not going to like hearing his tidy endings got smudges. He will like the handcuffs more than the smudges, Wolfe said. Telephone him. Again. Now. I sighed and dialed. Kramer's voice came through mid-grumble. Goodwin, if you're calling to compliment my report, don't. I wouldn't dream of it, I said, but Wolfe says your corpse doesn't add up. That's rich. He's had an hour to gloat. Save the sarcasm. Rowe was shot with a different gun. Ames's gun. There was a pause that could have served as a blackout. You're kidding. Nope. Coroner says water in the lungs, no head wound. Somebody staged the drowning. Kramer swore in stereo. Where's Ames? Wolfe's voice floated across the desk. Unreachable at the moment, but she will not remain so. I suggest dispatching 2 men to her hotel and 1 to the bus terminal. She will attempt flight, not confrontation. Kramer growled. You giving me orders now? Recommendations, Wolfe said. You may take credit later. Kramer muttered something unprintable but hung up. Wolfe leaned back again, eyes closing. Archie, arrange coffee. The night has shed its rest. Fritz appeared as if conjured, silver tray already armed with cups. I poured mine, black as intent, and watched Wolfe sip his with measured disgust. You think she planned it alone? I asked. Unlikely, he said. Miss Ames possessed cunning but lacked audacity. She required encouragement. Perhaps from someone who recognized Rowe's vulnerabilities and her own. I frowned, meaning someone else in the cast. Someone who understood Rowe's finances, Wolfe said. The Kents were pawns. The motive runs deeper, perhaps into the very company they shared. I leaned against the desk. You think there's a 4th partner? Or a silent shareholder, Wolfe said. Money does not vanish without a guardian. The phone rang again, sharp, fast, Saul's signal. I caught it. Yeah? Got her, he said. Ames packed a suitcase and tried to board a bus to Albany. I took a guess and blocked her at the counter. She didn't run, but she's white as chalk, Wolfe said. Bring her here. On it, Saul said, and the line went dead. I hung up. He's bringing her in. You want Kramer waiting or arriving angry? Anger first, Wolfe said. Arrival later. I grinned. That's my favorite sequence. Wolfe folded his hands again, contemplative. Archie, note this. Guilt often imitates fear convincingly, but fear rarely imitates guilt well. Miss Ames chose her mask too hastily. Meaning, she trembled at discovery before she was accused, a miscalculation only the guilty make, or the innocent with bad nerves. Pfui. Innocence requires composure. We didn't get to argue it further because 10 minutes later, Saul was at the door, ushering Lydia Ames in like a fragile shipment. She looked smaller under the foyer light, clutching the suitcase handle tight enough to break it. Miss Ames, Wolfe said, do sit. Running is unbecoming. She sank into the chair, eyes darting from Wolfe to me to Saul. You don't understand. I understand adequately, Wolfe said. Mr. Rowe's death did not occur as we believed. The bullet came from your revolver. Her breath hitched. That's impossible. I haven't... Miss Ames, he interrupted. You may choose honesty or hysteria. The first will serve you better. She stared at him for 3 full seconds before the fight left her shoulders. He called me, she whispered, 2 nights ago. Said he wanted to meet. Said he'd disappear for real this time if I gave him the money he hid in the Kent account. I went. He laughed at me. Said he'd sell my letters to the papers. I had the gun. I only meant to scare him. And succeeded fatally, Wolfe said. You fired once? Yes, she said, shaking. He fell into the river. I didn't look again. I thought he'd gone under. And then, Wolfe continued, you deposited the gun at the scene, trusting the narrative to form itself. Her head sank into her hands. I just wanted it over. It is now, Wolfe said. Inspector Kramer will collect you shortly. Mr. Goodwin, telephone him again. I did. He answered on the first ring. You got her? Wrapped and seated. Keep her that way. I'm on my way. I hung up and glanced at Wolfe. You could have been wrong, you know. I was not, he said. Someday that'll be carved on your tombstone. See that the carving is accurate, he said. Kramer burst in 15 minutes later, Saul letting him through. He took one look at Lydia and sighed. Every time I think I've got it, you add a footnote. Precision, Inspector, Wolfe said. It's a virtue, not a vice. She was led out quietly. Kramer gave me the familiar glower, then turned to Wolfe. You're a menace, but I'll admit it. You were right again. Of course, Wolfe said, already reaching for his beer. Kramer shook his head. If there's a next life, I hope I come back as your ulcer. He left. The door clicked shut. Wolfe took his sip, exhaled satisfaction. Archie? Another case resolved through intellect and error, both. Humanity retains its charm. Sure, I said, as long as it pays hourly. Indeed. He set the glass down with that same neat final tap that means the curtain's falling, whether anyone likes it or not. Not so fast, I said, because that glass tap of his always sounds like punctuation, and I wasn't ready to close the book. Something's still off. Wolfe raised one brow without effort. Off? Yeah, I said. Our secretary admits to pulling the trigger. Fine. But she didn't stage the forgeries, didn't dump the watch, didn't choose the river. She's too small time for that choreography. Someone else was still running the lights. He inhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate, like he was tasting logic for impurities. You persist in doubting the confession? I persist in smelling a rat, I said. And you taught me that's good hygiene. Pfui. He shifted in his chair just enough to signal mild interest. Elaborate. The forged contracts, I said. Those papers were too neat to be Rowe's solo act. He was a crook, not a clerk. Someone else with bookkeeping brains built that scaffolding for him. Wolfe's eyes opened wider. By his standards, a gasp. You imply a partner beyond Miss Ames? Yeah, somebody who knew where the books were buried. Before he could reply, the phone rang again. Fritz was at the door before I moved. For Mr. Wolfe, he said. Inspector Kramer. Wolfe groaned. That man has the perseverance of mildew. I grabbed the receiver. Goodwin speaking. Kramer's voice came through hard and thick. Tell Wolfe he's got one more problem. Ames is singing, but not the whole tune. Turns out some of those forged contracts tie to a third name, George S. Holden. Wolfe's fingers stopped drumming. Repeat, he said. I did. George S. Holden. Kramer said, Yeah, CFO at Kent's company. Real quiet type. Big on numbers. Bigger on disappearing acts. He resigned yesterday. No forwarding address. And guess what? The signature authorization on those forged invoices is his. Where is he? Wolfe asked. Gone, Kramer said. We're checking the train stations. Cease wasting men on transit hubs, Wolfe said. He will come to me. Kramer barked a laugh. You think so? I know so. Guilt prefers confession in private rooms. Thank you, Inspector. Wolfe hung up without waiting for protest. I leaned an elbow on the desk. You're expecting Holden here? Yes, Wolfe said. The pattern compels it. Mr. Holden was Rowe's silent investor, too cautious to appear, but too greedy to abstain. When Rowe failed to vanish cleanly, Holden saw exposure and removed him. Miss Ames provided convenient camouflage. Then why hasn't he skipped the country? Because men like Holden believe they can purchase invisibility. He will attempt persuasion first, with money or deceit, before he flees. Or bullets, I said. Possible, Wolfe admitted. You will keep your revolver accessible, though I prefer to solve matters with dialogue. Sure, I said. You talk, I duck. The bell rang then, sharp and civilized. Fritz appeared again, face composed but voice low. Mr. Holden, sir? Of course, Wolfe said. Admit him. I stepped behind Wolfe's chair just left of the globe. Strategic position. The man who entered looked exactly as billed. Narrow, neat, mid-40s, the kind who treats his conscience like a deductible expense. He removed his hat with the smooth precision of a man used to boardrooms, not interrogation. Mr. Wolfe, he said evenly, I understand you've involved yourself in an unfortunate business concerning my former associates. Unfortunate indeed, Wolfe said. Mr. Holden, please sit. You have been elusive. Holden took the chair across from him, resting his gloves on one knee. Not elusive, merely careful. I thought it prudent to distance myself from scandal. Yet you have come, Wolfe said. I prefer direct negotiation. Ah, Wolfe murmured. Transactional at heart. Then let us transact in truth. Holden's mouth twitched. Truth rarely pays dividends. Falsehood pays only briefly, Wolfe said. Mr. Rowe's embezzlement required your consent. The signatures confirm it. Holden's gaze flicked once. Quick, precise. To me. Then back to Wolfe. You have the papers? They are safe, Wolfe said. Unlike your position. Holden exhaled, calm but tight. Then perhaps we can make an arrangement. A contribution, shall we say, to your foundation of discretion. That one got me. I had to grin. He just offered to bribe Nero Wolfe. I hope you brought a bigger wallet. Wolfe's eyes gleamed faintly. Mr. Holden, you mistake me for a man who traffics in silence. I trade only in accuracy. You murdered Leonard Rowe. The words landed with the weight of granite. Holden's jaw flexed, but the eyes didn't blink. You overestimate my courage. Not at all, Wolfe said. I estimate it precisely. You lack the rashness for open crime, but possess the intellect for premeditated control. Rowe became erratic. His disappearance plan threatened your anonymity. You followed him, confronted him, and ensured his silence. You can't prove that. Holden said. On the contrary, Wolfe said, you have already done so. You came here, uninvited, to negotiate. Innocent men seek lawyers, not detectives, and you referred to Rowe as your associate, not your victim. Subtle, but sufficient. Holden rose, voice hardening. I don't have to listen to this. Sit down, Wolfe said quietly. It wasn't loud, but it had authority carved into it. Holden froze halfway up, then eased back down, something flickering behind the composure. I stepped a little closer, just in case. Wolfe continued, tone patient and merciless. Miss Ames's testimony implicates you indirectly. The police will match your handwriting within the hour. The only advantage remaining to you is dignity, a luxury of confession. Holden's hands trembled once before he caught them. You think I'll hand you that satisfaction? I think you already have, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin, the telephone. I reached for it, but Holden's voice cracked out. Wait. He swallowed, throat dry enough to rasp. Rowe had it coming. He was going to destroy everything. Me, the company, the clients. He left me no choice. Wolfe inclined his head, mild as a schoolteacher. So you chose to protect yourself by killing him? Holden's shoulders slumped. I shot him once. He didn't fall at first. He said he'd drag me down if he lived. So I pushed him into the river. Then I dropped the gun near the bridge and walked away. Until guilt directed you here, Wolfe said. A predictable pilgrimage. Holden laughed once, brittle. You think I came here to confess? No, I came to buy silence. You're worse than the police. You enjoy it. False, Wolfe said. I endure it. He lifted the phone receiver and dialed. Inspector Kramer, please. Holden rose again, faster this time. His hand went to his coat pocket. I already had mine halfway drawn. Don't, pal, I said. You're out of good ideas. He hesitated, eyes flicking between me and Wolfe, then slowly withdrew the hand. Empty. The fight drained out of him like air from a punctured tire. Kramer's voice came through the receiver. Yeah? Inspector, Wolfe said, your fugitive has arrived. You may send your men to collect Mr. George Holden. The address remains the same. Kramer's bark of surprise carried clear through the line. You're kidding me. I do not kid, Wolfe said, and hung up. Holden stood there, jaw working uselessly, before dropping back into the chair. You win? There is no victory in necessity, Wolfe said. Only conclusion. I said, if it helps, he never gloats until you're out the door. Wolfe shot me a look. Archie. Yeah. I went to the door to meet the incoming sound of sirens. Kramer's idea of applause. When they took Holden out, Wolfe was already reaching for his beer. The glass met the table with its usual finality, but this time it felt less like punctuation and more like a sigh. Feels more like a sigh than a victory, I said, watching Kramer's squad car pull away through the glass. You all right with that ending? Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the spot on the rug where Holden had stood, fingers tapping the armrest like he was testing the silence for cracks. Archie, he said finally, fetch the envelope from my desk, the one marked Rowe Receipts. I did, flipping it over to him. He pulled out the folded papers, spread them across the blotter, and started scanning. His eyes moved faster than I liked seeing them move. When Wolfe gets fast, it's never good news. This is not complete, he muttered. 2 invoices missing, numbers 47 and 49. I leaned over his shoulder. Maybe they're still in Kramer's coat pocket. No. He tapped the page with one thick finger. Miss Ames initialed the sequence when she helped Rowe fabricate the set. There are 12 documents. We recovered 10. Ergo, 2 are absent. So Holden kept them. Presumably. His gaze lifted to me, steady and grim. Archie, call the garage. Tell Mr. Panzer to return immediately. There remains the possibility that Mr. Holden was Not the final link. I blinked. Hold it. You think there's a fourth murderer? You're inventing a franchise. I think, he said sharply, that men like Holden do not handle money directly. He answered to another, someone with leverage enough to fund the embezzlement and silence the principals. Meaning the company wasn't just the victim. Somebody above the boardroom. Exactly, Wolfe said. The missing invoices will identify the beneficiary. I started toward the phone, but the ring beat me there. Wolfe's glance said, "Take it." I did. "Goodwin." "Saul," came the reply, low and taut. "You might want to sit on your boss. The news just hit the precinct. Holden's dead." That got both my eyebrows climbing. "What?" Kramer barely made it to headquarters with him. They stopped at the bridge crossing. Holden asked for a cigarette, stepped out of the car for air, and jumped. Straight into the river. "No recovery yet?" Wolfe's voice cut in, sharp and controlled. "Repeat that." Saul did. "He's gone. Whether jump or shove, you decide." But Kramer's face looked like he'd swallowed a badge. "Stay near the river," Wolfe said. "Find where he went in. He would not choose the same bridge by coincidence." "I'm on it," Saul said, and hung up. I turned. So much for your theory of controlled conscience. Wolfe's jaw tightened. A man like Holden does not leap. He is pushed. The design remains intact, merely advanced by desperation. I sat down, rubbing my forehead. So whoever was bankrolling Rowe and Holden decided the payroll was getting too crowded. Precisely. He reached for the phone again. "Fritz, more coffee. And the brandy. Intelligence thrives on stimulus." I smirked. "And calories." He ignored me, staring at the papers like they'd insulted his ancestry. "Archie, we must reconstruct what Holden withheld." The missing invoices were sequential, 47 and 49, both tied to deliveries routed through an intermediary firm. What was the name? "Something bland," I said. "Empire Supply, wasn't it?" "Bah, that was Rowe's shell company." "Think." I flipped open my notebook, tracing my own scrawl. "Here, Argus Procurement. Sounds noble. Smells rotten." "Indeed." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Argus, the watchman with 100 eyes, an apt mask for a thief. Find the registration of that firm." "That'll take a call to the Commerce Bureau." "Then make it," he said, "and expedite." I called, leaned on charm, and got a bored clerk who sounded like he was alphabetizing his own misery. 5 minutes and 3 sarcastic thank yous later, I had it. Argus Procurement, incorporated 6 months ago. Registered agent, Harold T. Baines. Wolfe's head tilted. "Baines?" "Yeah. Ring a bell?" He closed his eyes a moment, then opened them slowly. "Harold Baines. The Kent Company's external. Auditor." "Oh, terrific," I said. "The man who was supposed to prevent embezzlement wrote the permission slip for it." "Human irony is inexhaustible," Wolfe murmured. "Archie, telephone Inspector Kramer again. He will attempt to drown me with gratitude once more, but restrain him long enough to send 2 men to locate Mr. Baines. Suppose Baines hears about Holden's swan dive and decides to take up synchronized swimming. Then we shall intercept him before he perfects the art." I made the call. Kramer answered mid-roar, probably chewing out someone about waterproof handcuffs. "Goodwin, if you're calling to say, 'I told you so,' save it." "Relax," I said. "Wolfe says you've still got one breathing suspect, Harold T. Baines, company auditor and puppet master. He's your man behind the curtain." There was a silence, then the sound of a drawer slamming. "Baines? We interviewed him the first night. Claimed ignorance, looked bored." "Then he played you right," I said. "Wolfe says get him before he evaporates." Kramer growled something about ulcers and hung up without a goodbye. Wolfe was already leaning back, eyes closed. "He will send men to Baines's office and find it vacant. Within the hour, we shall receive a call confirming flight. I said, "You're sure of that?" "Absolute certainty," he said, because if Baines were innocent, he would already be calling to defend himself. The bell rang, as if timed by prophecy. Fritz appeared again. "Inspector Kramer, sir. He requests Mr. Wolfe immediately." Wolfe allowed himself the faintest sigh. "Of course." He took the receiver from Fritz. "Yes, Inspector." Kramer's voice blasted through loud enough for me to hear across the room. "Baines is gone. Office locked. Home empty. Passport missing. His secretary says he left an hour ago with a suitcase." Wolfe's eyelids drooped. "Precisely." "Don't say precisely," Kramer barked. "Where's he headed?" "Canada, I suspect," Wolfe said. "He will choose the St. Albans crossing. Fewer questions, more night. Send your men north." Kramer swore again. "If we catch him, you'll take the stand." "Gladly," Wolfe said, and replaced the receiver with surgical finality. I gave him a look. "You think they'll actually catch him?" He rubbed his chin. "If they do not, he will reach Montreal within 8 hours, but he will not last the week. A man of ledgers cannot survive untethered. He will contact someone for money, and that call will undo him." I leaned back. "You sound almost bored." He opened his eyes. "No, merely weary of predictability." "Well, I'm not," I said. "It's the first time I've seen you predict 2 murders and a confession before the coffee cooled." "Archie," he said, voice low but edged, "you may find it exhilarating to jest, but I find it disheartening that so few men understand how swiftly greed reduces them to puppets." "Sure," I said, "but puppets don't shoot each other without someone tugging too hard." He didn't reply. The rain had started again, ticking the window pane in a rhythm that sounded too neat for coincidence. He stared at it like it had interrupted his thought, then turned back to me. "Right," he said. "This sequence must be documented while the pattern remains lucid." "Notes again?" "Chronicle," he corrected. "There will be another knock before dawn, and I wish to have this farce complete before the encore." I started the typewriter, keys hammering through the room like small thunder. Wolfe leaned back, hands steepled, eyes closed. When I hit the line spacing, his lips moved once, soft enough that I barely caught it. "Men are incapable of silence," he murmured. "What's that?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, opening his eyes again. "Only that someone will call within minutes." I grinned. "I'll bet you a beer they won't." The phone rang. "Don't look so smug," I said, grabbing the receiver. "Goodwin." A voice I didn't recognize rasped through the line, low, clipped, and full of the kind of confidence that thinks it's anonymous. "Tell Wolfe the game's over. Call off the dogs." I shot a glance at Wolfe. His brows climbed half a notch. "And who's declaring the end of the game?" I asked. "You don't need the name," the voice said. "Just the message. The money's gone, the books are clean, and if Wolfe values his peace, he'll stop asking where Baines is." That earned a full opening of Wolfe's eyes. "Tell him," he murmured, "that peace is an illusion reserved for the dead." I repeated it into the mouthpiece. The pause that followed told me it had hit home. Then the line went dead. I lowered the receiver. Our mysterious baritone just hung up. Wolfe's voice was steady but thin-edged. Describe the voice. Mid-40s, educated. Probably smokes more than he eats. Confident but strained. Like someone trying to sound bigger than his nerves. American? Yeah, East Coast. Not Holden, not Baines. "Not Baines," Wolfe echoed. His gaze drifted toward the window, the rain streaking down like somebody drawing lines on his thoughts. Then the puppeteer remains unexposed. That call was neither farewell nor warning. It was possession. "Meaning?" I asked. "Meaning," he said, "that Mr. Baines is alive and his superior wishes us to believe otherwise." "Superior?" I said. "You just demoted a dead man." "Mr. Holden was middle management of Vice," Wolfe said. "A functionary. The architect hides still higher. The missing invoices were routed through Argus procurement, whose ledger, you will note, required oversight from the auditor's auditors. I frowned. Auditing the auditors. You're saying the money trail doesn't stop with the company, it jumps. Departments. It ascends, Wolfe said. Upward, inevitably, to a level of authority immune to ordinary suspicion. You're talking about Kent. Possibly. Wolfe's tone was flat. The husband, not the wife. His alibi rests on the inspector's temporary custody, but before that morning, before Miss Kent sought me, his whereabouts remain a fog. You think he met Baines? I think, Wolfe said, Mr. Kent's fear of disgrace surpassed his moral fortitude. If Rowe and Holden built the scheme, Kent may have tolerated it until the profits began to rot. So he hires Rowe's company, lets them embezzle him blind, and then decides to clean house when the scandal smells too close. Precisely, Wolfe said. He instructs Baines to eliminate Rowe, believing the audit trail will dissolve with the body. Baines, of course, miscalculates. Holden panics. Miss Ames panics further. Chaos consumes the structure, and we are left to tidy its bones. Then why call us now? To ensure our discretion, Wolfe said. But the call itself was an error. He cannot know that Baines failed to die quietly. I leaned back. You think the call came from Kent? He didn't answer immediately, which for Wolfe is confession by omission. Then he said, Archie, the telephone book on the side table. I fetched it. He flipped pages with the delicacy of a surgeon until he found what he wanted. Kent's residence number. He dialed it himself, fat finger pressing like a verdict. It rang twice. A woman's voice, thin with exhaustion, answered, Yes, Mrs. Kent, Wolfe said. This is Nero Wolfe. May I speak with your husband? A pause. He isn't here. Where is he? I don't know. He said he needed to go out. He left an hour ago. At what hour exactly? Close to 11. Wolfe looked at the clock. Then he has had sufficient time to cross into Canada. Did he take a suitcase? Yes, she whispered. He said it was for work. Madam, Wolfe said, your husband is not working. He's fleeing. I advise you to remain at home. The inspector will call. She started to say something, but he'd already set the receiver down. Archie, he said quietly, Kent is the final hand in this deck. Looks that way, I said. But if he's on his way to Canada, what can we do? Phone him at customs. Wolfe's gaze shifted to me, sharp as a tack. We can predict him. His temperament is methodical. He will not trust the border. He will attempt disguise, not departure. Where? Somewhere between cowardice and comfort, Wolfe said. Perhaps a hotel under another name. Call Saul again. He knows the underbelly of flight. I dialed, told Saul the new development. He grunted acknowledgement. Got it. If Kent's still in New York, I'll smell him. You might tell Wolfe he's getting predictable. 2 jumps ahead, as usual. I'll embroider that into a pillow, I said, and hung up. Wolfe's eyes were half closed again. Archie, bring me the map of Manhattan. I unfolded it on his desk. He traced a slow path with his finger from Riverside to Midtown. He left his house near the drive. His destination must combine anonymity with liquidity. Hotels are risky, clubs safer. I snapped my fingers. The Imperial Exchange Club. Rowe mentioned it once in a letterhead. Private membership, no press, no cops. Wolfe nodded. Precisely. Telephone them. Ask for the night porter. I made the call, pitching my voice easy. This is Arthur Rowe's office. We're trying to locate Mr. Richard Kent. Was he in tonight? The porter hesitated. Mr. Kent? Yes, sir. He arrived about 40 minutes ago. Requested a private room. Thank you, I said, hanging up fast. Got him. Wolfe's tone sharpened. Inform Inspector Kramer immediately. Tell him to intercept quietly. Kent may be armed or desperate. As I dialed, Wolfe leaned back, muttering to himself. There is still the matter of motive refinement. Money explains the theft, but not the killings. Try panic, I said. He shook his head. No. Panic produces errors, not architecture. Kent's mind, though limited, was disciplined. He intended to vanish under structure. Baines, however, knew too much. Therefore, Kent kills the man he hired to kill for him. Efficiency through paranoia, I said. Indeed. Kramer's voice came back on the line. Goodwin, if this is another one of Wolfe's midnight fairy tales, just listen, I said. Kent's at the Imperial Exchange Club. Private room, 40 minutes. If you move quiet, you'll catch him in the act of self-preservation. There was a pause, then the sharp exhale that meant the gears were turning. All right, I'll take a team. Make it soft shoes, I said. He hung up without argument. Wolfe closed his eyes again, and the air in the room changed. I've learned that silence in the brownstone has flavors. This one was heavy, waiting like a stage before the cue. We didn't wait long. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I grabbed it. Goodwin. Kramer's voice this time was lower, almost grudging. You got your finale. Kent's dead. I felt Wolfe's eyes open before I looked. Explain, he said. Gunshot to the chest, Kramer said. His own. Porter heard it, ran in, found him at the table. No note, no money, nothing but an open envelope with one sheet of blank paper inside. Wolfe's voice was a whisper of disgust. A coward's punctuation. Kramer sighed. You got your killer. The rest will go through the usual channels. He hung up before Wolfe could reply. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Wolfe said almost softly, Archie, pour me the brandy. I did. He took a slow sip, staring past me toward the orchids upstairs. An end without elegance. He murmured. Could have been worse, I said. He might have written your name on the envelope. Pooey, Wolfe said. I prefer blank paper. Oh, it admits its ignorance. He set the glass down, perfectly centered, and shut his eyes. I sat back, listening to the quiet tick of the clock, the sound of another mystery closed without celebration, just Wolfe's brand of peace. Restless, absolute, and waiting for the next intrusion. You prefer blank paper, I said, but Kramer's going to prefer headlines. You just handed him a corpse with a bow. Wolfe opened one eye. The inspector may indulge his vanity. I prefer the economy of closure. Closure, I said. We've got a missing envelope, a dead husband, a secretary turned marksman, and an auditor playing hide-and-seek with his pulse. That's not closure. That's modern art. Pfui. Wolfe's hand twitched for the brandy. The structure is intact. Every element has achieved its inevitable conclusion. Except the envelope, I said. Kramer said it was blank, but you don't believe in blank anything. He gave me a thin glance. No, Mr. Kent did not carry a void to his death. He carried a symbol, an assertion of futility, perhaps. Or more likely, deceit. Meaning? Meaning, he said, that he intended us to think the matter ended with him. He wished to extinguish curiosity. That, Archie, is the surest way to provoke mine. Great, I said. So now we're chasing metaphor. Not metaphor, Wolfe said. Money. He tapped the desk. The funds stolen from the Kent Company remain unaccounted for. Even with Rowe, Holden, and Baines excised, the sum is missing. I frowned. You think Kent didn't cash out before shooting himself? I think he no longer controlled it, Wolfe said. Someone still does. Who? The wife? He looked at me. Precisely. I sat back. You're saying Marion Kent knew where the money was the whole time. I am saying, Wolfe replied, that she knew something all along. Recall her confession of hatred. Too theatrical, too immediate. It diverted attention from motive to emotion. Women of her temperament do not confess hatred. They conceal it until leverage appears. Leverage, I said, meaning the money. He inclined his head. She believed she could save her husband by destroying Roe. Then, when the men collapsed in sequence, she found herself heir to a secret fortune and a corpse. She will now believe herself free. I grinned. Then let's ruin her mourning. Wolfe sighed. Not yet. We must first obtain proof. And how exactly do we do that? The woman's probably shredding her conscience as we speak. He lifted a finger. We invite her to tea. I blinked. You want me to call a fresh widow at 2 a.m. and invite her over for cookies? Archie, he said dryly, if you cannot phrase an invitation without confectionery, you lack imagination. Telephone her. Employ sympathy, not sarcasm. Tell her her husband's affairs require clarification. She will come. I wasn't sure whether to call him a genius or a sadist, but I dialed. The line clicked, and after a long pause, her voice answered, small and strained. Hello? Mrs. Kent, this is Archie Goodwin. Mr. Wolfe wishes to see you tonight regarding your husband's estate. It's important. Another pause. Then, is it about the money? That one nearly made me drop the phone. We'll discuss it here, I said evenly. She exhaled. All right, I'll come. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. She didn't even hesitate. He nodded once. Of course not. Guilt never sleeps. Fritz appeared 10 minutes later to report her arrival. She entered wrapped in grief and a fur coat, neither of which fit well anymore. Her eyes were hollow, her lipstick too exact. She sat without invitation. Mr. Wolfe, she said, I suppose you've heard. I have, Wolfe said. I extend condolences. Thank you, she murmured. It's unreal. He regarded her. Reality often requires reinforcement. You may provide it. Your husband left behind several irregularities concerning financial records and certain missing funds. Her fingers tightened around her purse. He told me everything was settled. Indeed, Wolfe said. Then you will have no objection to clarifying where the company's reserves were transferred. She blinked. Reserves? The money embezzled by Mr. Roe and Mr. Holden, Wolfe said, was not recovered. Nor could it have been dispersed without a destination account. That account required a name. I don't know anything about that, she said quickly. Wolfe's tone stayed mild. Madame, your late husband's suicide will satisfy the police. It does not satisfy me. You may either enlighten me voluntarily, or I shall provide Inspector Kramer with a theory unflattering to your innocence. That got her. Her voice cracked. You wouldn't. I would, Wolfe said. And I will, unless candor redeems you. The purse opened slowly. She withdrew a small key, brass, worn, attached to a velvet ribbon. It's in a safe deposit box, Midtown Bank, under my maiden name. Richard made me open it. He said if anything happened, I should take the papers and disappear. What papers? Wolfe asked. She swallowed. Bank drafts, certificates, the money from the contracts. He said it would keep us safe. Us, Wolfe repeated. You mean you and he, or you and someone else? Her gaze lifted to him, sharp and raw. What are you implying? That safety is rarely plural, Wolfe said. You will surrender the key. She hesitated, then placed it on the desk. If I give you this, you'll tell the police it's over? Madam, Wolfe said, it is over regardless. I merely prefer to end it, truthfully. I took the key and noted the tag number. Wolfe reached for the phone. Archie, accompany Mrs. Kent to the bank. Retrieve the contents under my authority. Mr. Kramer will meet you there. I nodded. She looked like she wanted to protest, but the words had gone. Fritz fetched her coat, and we stepped out into the wet street. The rain had calmed to drizzle, the kind that makes everything look like confession under glass. At the bank, a sleepy manager met us with forced professionalism. I showed him Wolfe's authorization card, the kind that could unlock the gates of purgatory if signed in triplicate. The vault clerk took us down. The box came out, small, heavy, unassuming. "Open it," I said. She did, hands trembling. Inside were 2 stacks of bonds, 1 envelope of certificates, and a folded note. She looked at it, went pale, and handed it to me. I unfolded it. Wolfe's name was typed at the top. Below, in Kent's hand, were 3 lines. "The rest is yours. You were right. She lied to you first." I stared at it. "That's poetic, for a suicide note." She shook her head violently. "He must have written that before. He was delirious." "Save it," I said. "You'll tell Wolfe yourself." Kramer's men arrived then, took the box, logged the inventory, and led her away gently but firmly. She didn't fight. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting. Another beer poured, another case, waiting for burial. I laid the note on the desk. He read it once, twice, then placed it neatly beside the brandy glass. "Predictable," he said. "Mr. Kent's final act was neither cowardice nor confession. It was vengeance." "Yeah," I said. "But on who?" He looked up at me, the glint back in his eye. "On both of us, Archie. On me for unmasking him, on her for surviving him. That is his blank page filled." I let out a breath. "And you call that closure?" He reached for the glass, took a deliberate sip. "Closure is an illusion reserved for detectives who retire." "I do not," I grinned. "Then I'll cancel the vacation brochure." "Do so," he said. "And Archie, inform Fritz we'll dine early. I find that deceit improves the appetite." He raised the glass, the final clink of punctuation. Said, "You mean deceit pairs well with trout?" "Pfui," Wolfe said, setting the glass down. "I mean deceit pairs well with hunger. It sharpens the palate, as guilt sharpens intellect." "Then Marion Kent ought to be a genius by now," I said. He turned his head toward me, eyes half-lidded, calculating. "No, Archie. She is finished. Her portion of cunning has expired." I leaned against the desk. Kramer's not going to see it that way. He's already planning headlines. "Wife hid fortune, husband hid bullet." "Let him," Wolfe said. "He requires spectacle to excuse inadequacy." "That still leaves one question," I said. "Kent's note. She lied to you first." "What did he mean? You didn't buy her story, and she didn't lie about the key." Wolfe's fingers touched the folded page as though it were evidence of contagion. "She lied about purpose, not fact. Her confession was selective, a performance designed to preserve the illusion of victimhood. When she claimed ignorance of the money, she wasn't protecting her husband. She was protecting herself." I frowned. "But she didn't spend a dime. The box was full." "Because, Archie," Wolfe said, "the money was never the object. It was the leash. She kept it untouched because it represented control. Her husband trusted her with it. The men conspired for it. Even Rowe coveted it. It was power distilled into paper." "And she liked the view from the top of the leash," I said. He nodded. "Precisely. When Rowe's death fractured the alliance, she discovered a novel opportunity to possess security without dependence. She chose silence, not innocence. That makes her smarter than the rest," I said. "Smarter, yes," Wolfe said, "but not wiser. Intelligence without conscience is merely velocity. One reaches destruction sooner." I whistled softly. "You ought to copyright those." He ignored me. Mr. Kent, perceiving her calculation too late, left his final barb. He meant to brand her deceit before self-erasure, to remind her that even ruin can be reciprocal. "Sounds like a marriage made in purgatory," Wolfe grunted. "Most are." The doorbell rang again. Fritz's footsteps padded in, dignified but wary. "Inspector Kramer, sir. He insists." Wolfe sighed. Then admit him. Let us endure the ritual. Kramer came in with the look of a man who's wrestled paperwork and lost. All right, Wolfe, he said, dropping into the red chair like it owed him rent. She cracked. Confessed she knew about the money, said she was trying to protect the company's name. The DA's satisfied. The papers are calling it the Kent finance scandal. Happy? Hardly, Wolfe said. A scandal implies novelty. This was merely arithmetic. Kramer glared. Arithmetic doesn't end with 4 bodies. On the contrary, Wolfe said calmly, it ends precisely there, when subtraction is complete. Kramer jabbed a thumb at the desk. That key she gave you, why'd she do it? She could have burned the evidence. She hoped for redemption, Wolfe said. The fatal vanity of guilt, to confess just enough to be pitied. Kramer snorted. You sound like her priest. I'm a diagnostician, not a confessor, Wolfe said, but both professions concern disease. You think she's diseased? I think she mistook cleverness for virtue. It's a common ailment. Kramer rubbed his face. You always have to moralize, don't you? I prefer precision to platitude, Wolfe said. You see villains. I see the anatomy of weakness. Mr. Rowe's greed bred deceit. Mr. Halden's cowardice bred murder. Mr. Baines's servility bred silence, and Mrs. Kent's pride bred them all. Kramer blinked. You're telling me she started this whole circus? I'm telling you she tuned the orchestra, Wolfe said. The rest merely played their instruments until exhaustion. Kramer rose halfway. You could have told me that before I spent 3 nights chasing corpses. Would you have believed me? Wolfe asked mildly. Kramer growled something unprintable and headed for the door. Someday, Wolfe, I'll have a case where you're wrong. Wolfe's eyes closed again. Then I shall sleep soundly that night. The door shut behind him with the weight of a period. I waited until the silence stretched. So that's it. You let her walk? She will not walk far, Wolfe said. Kramer will keep her under observation. The law may lack grace, but it seldom lacks stamina. Still, I said, you don't seem satisfied. He lifted his gaze to the ceiling. Because satisfaction implies pleasure, and there is none. The case began with a woman begging for justice and ended with one escaping it. That, Archie, is balance of a kind I detest. Then why take it? He turned his head toward me, and for a second there was something almost weary behind the eyes. Because when deceit governs commerce, it becomes invisible. Someone must render it visible, even if the cost is tedium. I grinned. That's your way of saying you're the city's unpaid janitor. Pfui! Janitors remove waste. I expose it. Distinction is everything. Sure, I said, and you'll charge twice the rate. He gave me the faintest flicker of amusement. As you remind me, business is business. Fritz reappeared in the doorway, polishing his hands on a towel. Dinner is ready, sir. Shall I serve? Now, Wolfe said, and generously. Mr. Goodwin has earned nourishment by enduring my discourse. Yeah, I said, but make it double. Moral enlightenment burns calories. That earned me one of his short, grudging grins, the kind that means equilibrium restored. He shifted his bulk, reached for the glass, and spoke without looking at me. Archie, you will forward my statement to Inspector Kramer in the morning. Concise, factual, without embellishment. And you? I, Wolfe said, will attempt to forget this woman's face before it pollutes my orchids. I rose, heading for the kitchen, and said, You've got a funny way of tending flowers. You spend half your life naming weeds. He leaned back, half smiling. Someone must remind the weeds they are not roses. Fine, I said. Just don't expect me to start pruning. Good, he said. You'd ruin the symmetry. Fritz's voice called from the dining room, announcing trout and a salad that smelled like victory to anyone with an appetite. Wolfe hauled himself up, moving toward the table with the deliberation of a man who has rebalanced civilization through reason and now intends to reward himself with butter sauce. As he sat, I poured him the beer. He nodded once, took a sip, and spoke the final line of the evening without looking up. "Man's folly," he said, "is that he calls corruption misfortune when it is simply choice." "Sure," I said, setting the bottle down. "But if they all made better choices, you'd be out of work." He gave me that tiny twitch of a smile, the closest Wolfe ever comes to laughter. And I called that a good place to end the day.